Hello, You-est, beautiful community, my listeners. I am so excited about my guest today, and I think you're really just going to fall in love with his energy and who he is. So let me share with you a little bit about Amrit beforehand, and then we're just going to dive in. And as always, I'm so honored to be here with you. I know there's many, many places that you can be. So thank you. It's a privilege. I'm grateful to be in your earbuds. And I know we are both going to hopefully have a conversation that really, really helps you to connect more deeply to your truest you. That's the goal. So meet Amrit Sandhu. I'm so excited about Amrit being here. He is an international speaker, a podcast host as well, and a founder of the Inspired Evolution. Amrit is certified. I love Eckhart Tolle so much. He's certified by Eckhart Tolle's School of Awakening and is also a Mindvalley's Master Certified Trainer for Australia and India. And he is in Australia, so we were joking about the time difference. So lives in Melbourne and is really about consciousness and transformation and healing. And I'm so excited because Amrit, he delivers keynotes, talks, seminars, and workshops for the Inspired Evolution and Mindvalley in the US, in Europe, Asia, Australia. Like this conversation about you being your You-est is totally in his wheelhouse as well. His gift for sharing impactful ideas and insights with unrivaled enthusiasm enables him to engage audiences from all over the world, featuring a wide range of demographics from corporate environments to construction sites, teenage programs, festivals, retreats, and the general public. Amrit, I'm so excited. We got to have a conversation on your podcast about a month ago, and I was like, oh my God, this is a soul brother. I'm so psyched to be back with you. I loved our conversation. I love the energy. So thank you for being here. Welcome to the You-est show.
Oh my God, it is such a treat and a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Julie. As exactly how you put it, I literally, when you're on the Inspired Evolution podcast, which was such a great conversation, even if I do say so myself, I was a part of it. It was, literally just, like you described, it was just, I met a soul sister, and it was just like, even in the conversation, I think we remarked on the fact that, it felt like, even though we just started talking on the podcast, it felt like we'd been talking for lifetimes, and not because it was long or boring. It was fun because it was just, there was so much just vibing in the space. So it is such a treat and an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited. This is such a gift. I would love for our beautiful listeners to kind of get a better sense of you and your background. I know that this concept of the inspired evolution, the work that you really, I was going to say thrown yourself into, but kind of embraced and immersed yourself into, wasn't always that way. Can you share a little bit about your background prior to kind of shifting into gear around the inspired evolution, all that you're doing? And, what even, like, what got you on this path?
It's a great question, and there's the 5-minute version, the 15-minute version, and the 3-hour version of this. So to give it to you concisely, one of the biggest lessons, often I get asked this question as well, which is on the Inspired Evolution. You've been podcasting, you do 2 episodes a week, you're interviewing all these incredible people such as yourself. What is some of the consistent things that you've learned? What are some of your biggest takeaways, Amrit? And one of the biggest things I've had to learn is that this story arc, of the hero's journey in everybody's life seems to be, I don't want to say inescapable theme or narrative, but I'm trying to avoid saying it just because I'm, a coach as well, and I don't want to lock anybody into anything, and I want to keep the field open. But it's, I've just seen it again and again, right? You've got individuals that were told they were never going to amount to anything, becoming the world's greatest hypnotherapists, right? You've got people that, have autism and, are corporate leaders, but then, they struggle to connect with people on a one-to-one basis. But everybody in the organization, their biggest gift is connection. So it's like our biggest challenges form our biggest gifts. And if you know anything about the hero's journey, it's like you've got to leave home, go on this journey, face a massive dragon, go through the biggest challenge, you slay the dragon, and then you come back with this amazing gift, right? Now that sounds like I'm gassing myself up a lot for having some amazing gifts, but stay with me. So yeah, you end up with these gifts, and then then you have to come home and integrate that. And it's interesting, that whole chop wood, carry water. Before enlightenment, after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. You've still got to come back to your roots and integrate the lessons that you've had. So all of that sort of preface to sort of say, fundamentally, I've had two really incredible challenges in my life. And incredible, I mean by size, not really by, oh, yay, that's incredible. So my first biggest challenge was I struggled with depression for 6.5 years then. And as a young adolescent male as well, I think depression's challenging for everybody that goes through it. I felt my challenge to be quite significant for me, specifically because at the age I was diagnosed, it was, you're 23, 24, and you're going through, like, you're meant to be pretty impervious as a young man at that age. You're meant to be very resilient. You're meant to be bulletproof. And yeah, I remember quite clearly my whole world had broken down around me. And we can discuss that further, but in the essence of brevity, I'd been through basically 6 years of just living out a life where I was trying to do the best with what I had, but I wasn't living in alignment to what I now know as my values. But back then I had no idea about the values conversation. And I ended up landed in front of a psychologist's chair, and she basically said, hey, you've got depression, you've been struggling, it's major depression, you've been struggling with this for everything you've shared for about 6 years, maybe a little bit longer. And then she went on to proceed to, support me on the journey and sort of say, hey, you're going to be okay. And that was quite profound, what she shared. Well, I'll share with you guys in the interest of adding value, two things she said to me when I was sitting opposite her. Firstly was, hey, you're going to be okay because of two things. Firstly was, A, something's wrong, and B, you're looking to change. And at the time she just said that, and I didn't even recognize that as being profound even in the slightest. And I just sort of carried on. I was like, okay, tell me what I need to do, yeah? And she went on to say, you just need to install honesty, because you don't have honesty in your system. Like, you're a dishonest person, and I truly was. And I thought everybody was faking it till they made it. I thought that was just an operating system that everybody operated on. And up until that point, subtly, but beneath the lines, it wasn't available for me to recognize that we're malleable internally. Like, this growth mindset piece, that was the first time I interfaced with this idea that, I can install bits and uninstall bits of me in and out. And she's like, yeah, you just need to install honesty. And I was like, wow. So that was this real profound piece around learning to install a value and sub out a value. So that was really helpful. And then those 2 points, now that I'm a coach and I've been coaching for the last 7 odd years, I recognize how important those 2 points are. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't you can't make them drink. They need to want to be able to change, and they need to know something's wrong. Those 2 ingredients are necessary for pretty much any transformation. So sort of zipped through that. I can talk more about what was going out of alignment, but that was my first biggest challenge, was depression. And navigating through that, the psychologist prescribed me antidepressants, which I took my first pill, and it didn't go so well. It went amazing, but I didn't want to live life on the sort of chemical roller coaster, as I put it. I didn't want to go up and down, up and down. And I was a young man, and I knew enough to sort of look at the box with caution after I took my first pill and said, that doesn't feel right, and just sort of threw my lifeline in the bin. My doctor at the time was really awesome. She was, she's got a Thai background. So she prescribed mindfulness. And at the time I remember it being like, what? Breathing? Shut up. I'm a young man. I breathe. It really, I look back now and I was like, oh my God, that woman changed my life. Yeah, and so she prescribed me a mindfulness breathing exercise, and it worked. It's been amazing, going down the path with that exercise. And then, that evolved me the way I share this from stages is say basically meditation reconstituted my life. Once I got into mindfulness, I started to realize what meditation is. And, my roots and heritage is I'm Indian. So, it was very accessible. It didn't feel very foreign. The conversation around meditation, mindfulness, I saw my father meditating daily, my entire life. So that was the first biggest challenge. And then, course correcting with installing integrity into like the way I interacted in my relationships was really profound. That had a massive shift. One of the telltale signs that I was struggling was I was actually removed from university early on when I got diagnosed with depression. And that was like a big thing because prior, when I left high school, I was this, touch wood, like academically I've always been quite sound. It's a bit stereotypical being the Indian guy that loves numbers and math, and I literally just loved physics and math. It was just, I just loved it. It was a language that I could speak. So, but then when I, was asked to leave university, I was like, what is going on? Like, why am I being kicked out of university? Like, I've always like academically been quite strong. And that was, I'm putting it politely, but like a lot of tears, a lot of breakdown to break through. A lot of relationships suffered during that period. And so course correcting from there with the meditation and mindfulness, I basically went, back to university. And then when I finally graduated university a few years later, I don't share this piece to sort of, again, elevate me, but when I was awarded this award, I said I'd use it to inspire people. So I have an obligation to receiving this award, which was I graduated university not just top of structural engineering, structural and civil engineering, but not just engineering, but also every single student in that year across all degrees and cohorts. And again, it's totally loaded. Like, how can you grade a pharmacy student against an engineering student or an economics student, or an art student? It's all different. So I totally respect that. But I think the reason I got gifted the award was because for, academic excellence and leadership and innovation was, in the interview process for the awards, time and time again, they said, why should we give you this award? And I said, look, looking in on my story, I struggled with so much poor mental health. Like, and if the same person that was removed from university then graduates university top of not just his class, his cohort, his degree, the entire field, and then also the university, like, it shows just how potent the mental health conversation really is. Thank you guys so much for following along to listening to that point, but it really just gives me the permission and the space to make that point because it's night and day. Like, the guy that got kicked out because his GPA grade point average was like, they couldn't proceed further with me, to the point where it's like, yeah, anyway, I've made the point. So that was quite a profound transformation. Through there, with that.
Can I ask you a quick question, Amrit,
Yeah,
before I'm interrupting you totally, because
good.
it's really just that in itself is so powerful. Like the
I know.
dichotomy, right, of
Yeah, touch wood.
the dark depression, getting kicked out to like graduating at the top. Just even it's really like it's a sales pitch for mindfulness, for breathing, for connecting in. It's like it's a real like, hello, we all need this. I have a quick question before we get to the second challenge, because I'm actually curious, coming from your family, and you said your dad meditated and more of a traditional, it sounds like Indian family background.
Yeah.
How did they handle, how did they kind of respond to you during those darker times when you had depression? What was that like for you in your family of origin?
Yeah, okay, cool. So let's dive in a little bit deeper then. So the key thing in there actually is there's a lot of confounding factors. At the heart of what I understood my depression to be was this misalignment between my family values and my cultural values. Growing up as an Indian, I was the first generation growing up in Australia from an immigrant family, and my collective society that I was going to school with, I was very, like, because I was an only child, touch wood, my parents worked very hard as immigrants to put me in a really nice education. And through that, like, I was interfacing with, you know, I was one of two only kids of color basically in my entire year. And, there's about 100 to 120 people in a year at this school. So in that, I was different. But also there was very different values in that space, that my parents were trying to, they were trying to install into me through the school I was going to. But there was a real clash of values growing up Indian in an Australian environment. And I think this happens a lot now with migration, with that people, and I now can articulate it so simply, right? It's like there was a misalignment of values. There's Western values, there's Indian values, and they don't necessarily fit male and female glove hand in hand, right? Like hand in glove. It doesn't necessarily work. There are certain things that butt up against each other, and those are butting up inside you. And you don't know how to reconcile them because you don't have the emotional regulation, you don't have the emotional intelligence, you don't have the awareness, you don't have the self-reflection. This is where mindfulness comes in, because it's the first gateway. I was going to call it a gateway drug, but the first gateway to sort of start looking in on yourself, and then the emotional stuff comes in behind it, and the awareness, and the So that was the big thing. Now, to just really cement it in people's mind what was going on. So, if you look at India as a country, my analysis, and this is, I'm not an economist, but my analysis of India is, there's three things that really have it hamstrung, which is population, pollution, and corruption, right? There's these three things that the country really struggles with, right? And, you can argue that pollution and corruption are a consequence somewhat of such a burgeoning population. Basically, you've got so many people trying to, fighting over limited resource. There is this clambering energy. Right. Now, it's interesting because I have such a love for India, because it is still the place in the world, like almost the last Mecca, where the sadhu, the sage, the saint is still worshipped over the CEO. Everywhere else in the world, it's like, CEO, check out my stripes, and it's like this very West right brain thinking sort of mentality, which is, logic. We created something in business. But India is still this Mecca where, yeah, sure, and the CEO pays his respects to the sage and the sadhu. So I guess that's eliciting that I still believe spirituality is, I don't want to say king, but, maybe it just makes the conversation faster if I say that. I think spirituality is always meant to be the crowning jewel of our lives. And India still gives us that. So that's India. But with the population thing and the clambering, you find, I've got cousins in India, they drive BMW 7 Series, but they live in a 1-bedroom studio apartment. And it's like your home is, your car's worth almost as much as your home. And I understand it as them trying to put their best foot forward when they're going out to meet people socially, when they're going out to meet business interactions. They're dressed to the nines, to the parts, to make sure that, even that little 1% difference makes a massive difference in terms of them moving through society with the most amount of grace. All of that to sort of say they're faking it till they make it. They're trying to put their best foot forward, right? If I was sitting opposite that psychologist, she would say, "Oh, that's impregnated with dishonesty, though." Right? And I grew up in a Western climate in Australia where, we can argue that the West is also corrupt. So that's a whole other podcast. But in there, there's people value transparency. People value vulnerability. Like Brene Brown's work, right? It's like, just be vulnerable. That's the real strength. Yeah. So all of that sort of I was growing up where people are just like, tell me how it is. And this sounds like, I was burying these massive lies. And, to some degree, it shows up how you this is somatic work, right? Learning how you do the small things is how you do the big things. Simple things, right? It's like, hey, I'd be going around to Julie's place for dinner, and Julie'd pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, Amrit, dinner's ready. Everyone's waiting. There's 10 people here. How far away are you? Should we start or should we wait for you?" And I'm like, "Oh, Julie, I'll be there in 5 minutes." And then I'd hang up. Half an hour later, Julie calls Amrit. She's like, "Amrit, where are you?" "We're waiting. Dinner's getting cold." I'm like, "Oh, I'm just 5 minutes away. I'll see you in 5 minutes." Right? And then I'd hang up. And then it'd be an hour later, I'd be getting there, and I'd be leaning into my social skills to then mull the situation over. So why would I not just tell Julie that I'm going to be an hour late? Please proceed without me, right? And full transparency, how I operate now is if I'm going to be an hour late, I tell people I'm going to be 90 minutes late. And then I usually get there, so I'm not stressed when I get there. And then also there's enough buffer time and I can sort of rest and relax. And they're mildly surprised. I thought you were going to be an hour and a half late. It's like, yeah, well, I am late, but I'm not as late as I said. Great. That's how I had to heal, right? And then operate from that place. But all that to sort of say what I was doing was putting my best foot forward, because on the phone, this is the best foot forward with the Julie at the right time. It's like, okay, just 5 minutes. And then she won't be disappointed. She's like, oh, it's only 5 minutes. Okay, he'll be here soon. And then the churn starts to happen in the background of like, so those are the small things. And they started really early on, right? So that's a cultural thing. Like I grew up with that as a culture. Now, does that mean my parents are dishonest? No, right? Like my parents have a lot of integrity. It's just a cultural value that I picked up from that environment. That is, and then it blew out in massive proportions because it was consistently butting up against this just be transparent and honest and this dishonesty, and I just could not reconcile them. And so what was happening, and this is perfect for the USU podcast, and this will come into the second challenge I had as well, which was I couldn't be honest with myself. Like people will look at, the people that people that I hadn't been honest with. There's a lot of forgiveness in that space that's required. And people go, hey, how did you go about the reparations? And there's been so many phone calls that have been made, right? That I've gone back and said, hey, like that was a really challenging time for me. I'm sorry if I, did this and did that. And I really had some really transformative stuff happens when you go back to have conversations that are really difficult to have. Hence podcasting has taught me so much. But yeah, in there, one of the key things that I had to, and I still stand by, is the hardest wound is the wound on the self. Like it's so hard to forgive myself for not showing up authentically as the person that I was, but that was all I had, and I was doing the best I could with what I knew, and yet it was falling so short of what I really was trying to achieve in my interactions with my relationships, in world success, fulfillment, all of that. So that describes a little bit around the values piece. And so obviously that was where the psychologist, she was amazing. She was just like, honesty, just install honesty and everything will, as a transformation coach in the Inspired Evolution, like I would love to say, oh yeah, as of that moment, from that point forward, I was just completely honest. And absolutely that didn't happen, right? Like it's a thing you have to then coach yourself and train yourself and literally rewire your brain. So the process of myelination, the USU podcast, people probably know a little bit around it. Neurons that wire together. And that wire is called a myelin sheath. There's a little bit of neurochemistry, and then basically that myelin is a pathway. So every time you ping something new, you're putting down a new sheath. And all the old pathways are super highways. You've already done that a million times. So there's like this super information electrical circuits, just information, just path of least resistance, ping, 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 ping. And then we're trying to build in new pathways, right? And so that's where a little bit of conscious attention, mindfulness, being aware of what you're trying to do in the face of what is natural for you to do, breaking these patterns, you can start pinging new pathways. And so I started pinging new pathways for honesty, right? But the old pathway still existed. The good news for those that are looking to transform is actually that the old pathways, as you start to stop using them, they actually atrophy as well, which is super dope.
Pruning. They prune.
Right, exactly. So you want them to disappear while the new ones sort of connect up as well. So both are happening in your favor if you're approaching it with awareness.
Amrit, it sounds to me like this is really helpful, because I think this is something you said that really lit up for me, for everyone, which was you weren't being honest with yourself. And it can show up in small ways like people pleasing, lack of integrity with yourself, not being fully authentic or fully open. Maybe that was the cultural way of like, I'm almost there. Running late might have been something that you do, or to, as you said, fake it till you make it. And what I'm hearing is it like, you couldn't do it anymore. Your soul woke you up through depression and was like, this is not working. And, I know for some, medication with depression does work, which is fine. And it can go beautifully with mindfulness. And so it sounds like for you, really shifting into the most important relationship, which is the whole point of exactly what you said, this show, the reason we're even talking about this, is to be honest with yourself, to create those new habits. I just think it's amazing that you did that. You really put the spotlight on you and realized, oh, I'm out of integrity with myself,
Yeah.
and
And
to retrain yourself. It's
I
huge.
would like to sort of say there's massive asterisks here. There are definitely some people that need chemical support, and the medication and the
Yeah.
SSRIs definitely are supportive for you. There's a whole other conversation that's available to us around soil health, gut health, minerals and nutrients not being in the soils, different chemistries in your brain not being supported the way that it should be by its
Yes.
food. And if you need some sort of chemical external support to get your brain levels harmonized, I'm
Yeah.
not demonizing SSRIs and, anything that can help you in that way. For me, and this is, now with a sense of intuition, touch wood, and touching all the wood, and you and I operate both from a, intuitive space, it's Sister Bear.
Yeah.
There was some part of me that was always looking, and it was such a small part, and intuition, the voice we now know is like, your head's talking at this volume. But if you're always just talking, it's just like you never really hear that voice. And there was some part of me that was waiting for a calamity. I was on the hero's journey. Intuitively, I knew that what I was doing wasn't right. On a really, saying I knew sounds like it was conscious, but it wasn't. It's like this subconscious part of you that knows that surely, like, it's desperate. It's a desperate knowing that surely life is not meant to be like this. Like, I'm so conflicted and there is so much internal friction and there is so much suppression, right? And so much repression. Like, there is so much. And, beautifully put, suppression, depression is the opposite of expression. And allowing yourself to express yourself authentically, find that you, be able to communicate that vulnerably, authentically. It's not easy. You're absolutely right. But then also there was an intuitive, there was a mystical sense at some point, which was, something was wrong. I knew something was wrong the whole time, but I thought everybody was carrying something wrong. And that's the hallmark of depression, right? It's like you think the whole world is kind of like this and you sort of just carry on with it. That's how you live with it for 6 years. You're just like, oh, I know I'm kind of fucked, but I think everybody else, pardon me for the French, is everybody else is fucked as well. And this is just how the world is. Actually, it's not. Yeah. But you don't realize that until you reach out and get help, which is, again, why I do all the coaching that I do, is to basically support people and help, because people have been so gracious to me on my journey.
Yeah. Let's go into the second challenge. So, what?
Because you
Yeah,
think,
let's dive in there.
thank you for holding space for that. Because you'd think, like, after you've done all this, like, figuring out, it's like, oh, you've figured it out. You've been on the hero's journey. It's all nutted. And actually the key piece that was nutted was relationships, because like I described before, like I was dishonest a lot in relationships and I learned to, like, okay, come into harmony with relationships, but there's still that piece with the self. And so the second part, as you guys will recall, I graduated university dressed in all these colors, right? And touch wood. And then from that, I basically got this job, which was like the ideal job for a young man for me to be able to get. And therein ensued like another 7-year struggle, because by everybody's standards, I had this dream job. And even by everything that I'd, learnt and was coached and taught, and, you can argue that, it was like, I went university the long way around, but even all my preschool education, like preschool, school, all the pre-university education, sorry, I should say schooling education, was leading up to this. I spent my whole life getting this amazing job, buying into this story, which was, we all buy into it. It's like, get good grades, study well, do well in primary school, do well in high school, get a good job, marry well, have kids, buy a nice house, white picket fence, red car in the driveway, blah, 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 blah. And then, by the time you're 65 and you've earned enough money to live your life, off you go, enjoy your life. Between the ages of 65 and 85, when you're not as mobile as you initially were as well, right? Like there's, like I'm now starting to get, like, I'm 35 now. And there's stuff already starting to happen. And I'm like, this is annoying. Like, okay, now we have to go into prehab. It's not about rehab. Like, I'm living with like prehab stretching and stuff like this, touch wood. And it's just really, yeah. Anyway, so then like picturing what it's like at 65, not to say like, oh, it sucks getting older, but your physical body's going to change. And so that story, like, I totally bought into it and I was going along with it because, again, like, I'd leaned out of this like Eastern philosophy deep into this Western sort of, okay, how do I integrate in? How do I make the most of everything that I'm meant to be integrating in with honesty, transparency, and the honest path was this: make an honest living, right? So let's go down into this job. Got this amazing job. I remember though, day one, going along to this job, and I remember seeing the regional director, which was just one under the CEO. And I think he eventually became CEO. And seeing this gentleman, and I remember the first day I saw him, and he was interacting with some other people, and the way he was talking to people and what was going on, and I was just like, ooh, this is not an honest gentleman. Like, this is a dishonest person. Like, you could just tell. Because of all the work that I'd done on myself, right? It wasn't just like this guy was toxic. It was just touch wood. Because of all the work that I'd done specifically in that area, you become a bit of a like master in that space, and you go, oh, that's what it looks like in its shadow. That's what it looks like in its light. This is how you work with it. So I'd done a lot of work on it, and I could see it in the other individual. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. This corporate ladder leads here. Anyway, maybe, and this was the philosophy I was carrying at the time, so, we want to be the change we want to see in the world. It's still very present to the Inspired Evolution. Be the change you want to see in the world. And so all of that to sort of say I was carrying that as an intention for like 7 years to sort of see, maybe the next generation of leadership will be different in this organization, and, the ladder leads to that title, but not that mentality. And after a while, I hate to sort of put it this way, but now a lot of what I do with values work with organization is cultural awareness, organizational awareness, and how to shift based on values and values alignment. And it's ridiculous to expect everybody, each individual, to have the same values as the organization they're working in, but there should be a dance and a harmony and a match, right? Not what I was confronting before with like being Eastern and Western philosophies and then butting up against each other. If they're butting, you don't have job satisfaction, but that's, again, a whole nother podcast. So in there, one of the things I was finding was the culture was set by the leaders, and I wasn't, like, it was rubbing the cat really the wrong way, to the point where I was a people person, and going into the organization literally felt, and it felt soul sucking. I hate using that word because of my training and practitioner as an NLP. It's like you're not meant to word stuff the way that you don't want to hear it, but it is genuinely the easiest way to describe it for those that are tuning in. And for those that are Matrix nerds, in the second movie, Morpheus takes Neo to reality as it is outside of the Matrix. He shows him this is what reality currently looks like. The sky is scorched, machines are everywhere. It looks like New York City, and there's fields and fields of humans being grown. And Morpheus says to Neo, believe it or not, it's the humans that scorched the sky, because they thought if there wasn't enough solar energy making its way through to the earth, the machines wouldn't have any power to run. But the machines, in their infinite wisdom, realized that human beings are a great source of energy and started growing and harvesting them. And they're all growing in these pods, and they're plugged into this, they're plugged into the Matrix, so that they believe that they're living out a life while they're actually being harvested by the machine for their energy. Touch wood. Now, that energy harvesting conversation is legitimately how I felt every day going into work, yeah. And I joke when I'm on stage, because I say, I just had my midlife crisis earlier. Most jobs are 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Construction here in Australia was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m, 6 days of the week, yeah? And then you still had your overtime. So some days I was going home at 10, 11 o'clock and still back on site at 6, right? So I just put in the same amount of hours. I just front-loaded the pain, right, for the transformation. So I'm not any more special than anybody else. It's just, after a while, many people have that midlife crisis where it's like, holy shit, they have that realization. I just had that pain a lot earlier. And so all of that to sort of say career misalignment was my second biggest challenge, right? And it was so ironic because you'd think that having understood honesty, I could be honest with myself that this is not what I want to do and what do I honestly want to do. Yet, and there were some courageous conversations that I had through the process of healing my honesty with others. And yet I clearly remember one of the most profound moments in my life. I was sitting on at work on the construction site and, eating an acai bowl. And you can picture this meme, right? It's like, which one of these is not like the others? Yeah. So like hard hat, steel cap boots, high vis shirts, everybody's sitting and like someone's eating a sausage roll, someone's eating, like a burger, someone's eating chips with gravy. And here's Amrit with an acai bowl. Like which one of these is not like the others, right? Touch wood. Anyway, so I'm eating the acai bowl. And I've just had this moment of like inspiration and I've just Googled the word courage. And I don't know what possessed me. Even till today, I can't tell you. Something higher, I imagine. And I'm just Googling the word courage and I'm having an epiphany reading the definition of courage. And what's popping in as I'm reading my phone is like, whoa, courage is not having fear, because I thought courage and fearlessness were the same things. Braveheart was one of my favorite movies. And I thought courage and fearlessness were exactly the same thing. But at that point, it said courage is not having fear. Courage is absolutely having fear and then taking action towards and into and through the fear. And I was like, oh shit, courage is a skill. And as a young man, I've always sort of like idealize like courage, strength, bravery as these values, right? And I was like, if I'm going to be a courageous person, the very next thing was like, oh, courage is not fearlessness. I just thought some people were courageous and some people weren't, yeah? I was like, no, courage is a skill. It's something you work on in life. And if you want to identify as courage, the next moment in the epiphany was literally like, what is your biggest fear? And it was like what life looks like outside of this white picket fenced lane of me getting good grades, getting good job, then having a family, then getting a house and retiring and living my life out of retirement. What's going out here? And there were people that I could see that were out there, right? That were like coaches, speakers, authors. Podcasting had just started back then, but there were people that were like so many entrepreneurs, creatives, artists, so many interesting people living life on their own terms, following their calling, living their purpose, right? And I was like, I'm kind of academically, I'm kind of smart. Like I should be able to figure this out, but I'm in a dead end. Like I'm really stuck, and I've been feeling this internal angst again, right? Knowing what depression feels like and how depressing my job feels for me because I can't express my authentic self, which is now what the touch would let the cat out of the bag. I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, I'm a podcaster, and this is my truest expression, conscious conversation, and I get to live that, right? But doing this work is part of my mental health strategy as well. Like, we're about to have a kid anytime now. My wife's like 37, 38 weeks. And last time we had a kid, I spoke to my wife. I was like, how come you, and this is not our relationship. She doesn't let me. She hates it when I put it like that. She's like, I don't let you. You just do your thing, right? I was like, yeah, but just for the sake of the conversation, it's like, how come you let me sort of do the podcasting or held space for me to do the podcasting and the coaching throughout, even when we had a kid? And, it was such a demanding time when he was like, first 6 months of any baby is a really trying time with lack of sleep because it put more pressure on her. And she goes, yeah, but I also know that when you're doing that stuff, you're like, that's you. And you're so lovely to be around when you're doing what you love. Like you're so full and you're so enriched. And I got that response and I was like, wow, that is so heartening to hear. And like the reflection was also like, oh yeah, like my work is now part of my positive mental health strategy. Like it's come full circle. But that was my second biggest challenge, was 7 years of career misalignment, feeling like my soul was being sucked out. And then that was the birthplace, and this is where we started. And sorry it's taken so long to get to here. But yeah, that was the birthplace of the Inspired Evolution podcast. I was inspired to evolve. There was people that inspired me on their path, right? And let's be honest, we've talked about some shadows, we've talked about some light. A great way to start with understanding what inspires you, take a look at what you're jealous of. Yeah, that's the shadow of inspiration. Yeah, the jealousy piece, going, oh, that person's got that. That's amazing. This person's having this impact. That's amazing. Great. That's just a shadow. transmute that into that person's just doing it so that I can see it's possible. And now it's inspiration, and it can help you animate you in that direction, right? If it's available for them, it's available for you. If I can see it, I can also hold it. So this then becomes, okay, like I can actually achieve something. And so that was the inspiration. And then obviously in order to follow into those inspirations, I had to evolve once again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And so that's the birthplace of the Inspired Evolution.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, there's so much in what you just said. I think, one of the things before we wrap, I do want to get into values. I know it's an important piece for you, but one of the things, Amrit, that I love about you, and I'm really grateful to share your story because frankly, I know from the notes I get from the people I connect with here, like there are many of us who I know for me too, in a job that's fine or not even that fine, pays the bills, but does not move you, does not feel like something feels off. It doesn't feel so aligned. It's soul aligned. It doesn't feel like you're really using your higher gifts, the part of you that came here to express. And I love that you went into courage and talking about it as a skill. I think that's brilliant and beautiful because it is not just, okay, I'm going to be courageous. I'm going to move through the fear, because you can guarantee there's going to be fear. I mean, if you're doing something you haven't done, and especially you're leaving a job, I know whatever it is that feels uncomfortable, right? It's not going to necessarily feel comfortable at all. That's to be guaranteed. But as you said, and I love this, you take action through the fear and it becomes a skill, and that becomes the skill that you kind of have as your foundation. It's ironic, being in that construction. I think of it as like, it's not just the wood planks you're laying down. It's the courage that you're laying down. It's the honesty that you're laying down. So you kind of shifted your, construction site. You actually created an internal construction site that is now the basis of your foundation, courage, honesty, following your heart, your whispered intuition, you have a whole new construction site. And that's really inspiring. And I love that you went into the jealousy shadow side as well. That's a great question and I think, for those you're listening, we'll have this in the show notes, but to really ask yourself where and who might I be envious of or jealous of? And don't get upset with yourself. Like you just said, Amrit, look and see what is it under there that is showing me as a mirror of who I am. So there is so much growth here. I think it's incredible. I can't believe you're only 35 years young. My gosh, my friend, come talk to me in 10. I'm like, it took me a little longer,
keep me
but
humble as there.
yeah, it's amazing.
I loved what you were describing as well, because the moniker now, the Inspired, like Amrit Sandhu, is a spiritual life engineer.
Life engineer, nice.
So yes, totally building. That's totally like still building inner working with belief systems and structures and inner systems. And yeah, you mentioned the values piece, and just to sort of, I guess, round it out, it's, the biggest piece again, like, the depression, not honest with myself, again, perfect for the USU podcast. And then the career misalignment for 7 years. Like now I can say, of course I was meant to go through that. My values as Amrit are connection, contribution, and celebration. And people often talk about, oftentimes when I'm on a podcast, it's Amrit Sandhu, live your purpose. It's like, how do you find your purpose? And it's like, well, the temple of your life is the reason you were erected in life. It's the reason you exist, right? And the energy of life is flowing through you. You're just a vessel, yeah? So that's the purpose. What is the purpose of you being erected? You are a temple. My body is a temple. Pardon me, I'm Indian. I can make that joke. But, the pillars of your temple are your values, yeah? And so my values, with a little bit of work, and this is available to anybody, right? So if you want to figure out your values 20 minutes from now, you can literally be as clear as I am. inspiredevolution.com/values. inspiredevolution.com/values. 20 minutes from now, you'll have the exact same clarity that I do in what your highest values are. Mine's are connection, contribution, celebration. Yeah, so my pillar of me is connection, contribution, celebration. Now let's take a quick audit, and look back at the job I was doing. Was there an ability, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., working 6 days a week, connecting to people? not really the kind of people I wanted to connect with. Right now I'm doing podcasting, coaching, speaking. I'm connecting with people such as yourself, invested in spirituality, personal development, growth, entrepreneurship, creativity, building out businesses that are in line with their soul. These are the people I'm connection is at an all-time high, but back then, absolutely not. Contribution. Well, hopefully, me sharing my story and some insights today is contributing to people here. So podcasting, we know works, touch wood. Coaching, absolutely, this contributes a massive sense of contribution there. Public speaking for transformation and inspiration, absolutely, there's a massive sense of contribution there. Let's audit that again, back at the old job. And it was like, well, is there a lot of contribution? And maybe some, because I was building high-rise towers that were apartments for, again, immigrant families that were migrating to Australia, similar to what my family origin story was. So maybe I'm building homes. There's a contribution there. Third, celebration. As you can tell in today's conversation, it's, touch wood. Hopefully this is a high vibe conversation for people. You're celebrating life a little bit richer, fuller because of this, like having tuned in and spent your valuable time here. Coaching. Hopefully people can celebrate the energy of life a little bit fuller through their being and their experience of life. Public speaking, same intention. So connection, contribution, celebration are my highest values. When I look back, there was no celebration in the building gig, right? So I'm looking at that and kind of going, half of a value, maybe one of my top 3 values was being met. Of course I was misaligned. What does alignment look like? Alignment starts by having the awareness of what you're trying to align to. What are you trying to align to? What are the pillars of your temple? Right. The pillars of you are your values. Get to know your values. So now that I know that I'm connection oriented, I'm contribution oriented, and I'm celebration oriented, and these are the pillars of Amrit, those are the things I'm meant to be doing. Now, that doesn't mean that other things aren't amazing. They're just not amazing for me. So that job was brilliant as a job. It was for someone that really wants to do that, that's an incredible gig, yeah? And it pays really well. It just isn't Amrit's gig, yeah? And I can rest in that now going, I can let go of that because it's not for me. What's for me is this, where I get to connect, contribute, and celebrate. And if I can double down on that, you can rest assured me working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. happens all the time in Inspired Evolution, but it doesn't feel like work. Yeah, I'm just here doing stuff, and it just is part of the extension of my being, touchwood. It's more being and little to no doing. And so that's the transformation through understanding our values. And now values, that's the macro. And once again, as we were describing before, the somatic experience, it shows up in the little things. If someone calls me out, like Mindvalley, like not so long ago, was like, hey, we want to start a coaching program. And we're looking for, 2 to 3 coaches that can help us start Mindvalley coaching. And I was like, okay, this sounds like a great experience. And I quickly, knowing my values, went, will I get to connect to people all over the world? Absolutely. And their Mindvalley tribe, this is going to be dope. Contribution, it's coaching. Yeah, we're totally going to do that. Celebration, absolutely. People are going to live life richer. I'm in. We didn't talk about terms of contract. We didn't talk about how much they were going to pay me. We didn't talk about anything. I just knew that this opportunity was for me because my values were being met. Connect, contribute, celebrate. Obviously, then absolutely we went to dot the I's and cross the T's, but it took me less than 10 seconds to give them a yes and know that it was a yes, like a full-hearted yes, right? And then now there are opportunities that, as you can imagine, right, Touchwood, with a growing YouTube channel, growing online social media presence, like opportunities flood themselves at you. And it can be so overwhelming because you can say yes to everything. I'm a yeser, right? I'm a people pleaser. And then learning to go, just audit that and go, okay, is this for me? Is this line up? All I have to go is this going to invite more connection? No. That's my first value. That's already a massive red flag. Does it do contribution and celebration? If it does both of those pretty well, I might do it. But if it's got connection and contribution in it, I should probably do it. If it's got connection, contribution, and celebration in it, we're doing it. Like it doesn't matter. I'll do it for free, right? Like, because it's enjoyable for me to do it. You're giving me permission to show up as even more me. Thank you. Right. And so the little things and the big things, they're everywhere. Arguments with my wife, like she is integrity. That's her highest value. Mine's is connection. If we run into somebody that's being an asshole to us, I'm just trying to get away from the situation. I'm just like, let's leave. The loudest words are my feet and I'm walking away. And she's like, someone needs to tell that person though. And I'm like, integrity definitely thinks that. Connection goes, I don't want to connect, let's go. Now I could sort of sit here and be like, I'm not the right man for my partner, or I can just be like, actually, my partner's pillars are different to my pillars, and I can see the beauty in the world from those pillars. And so we don't argue. Like, I don't argue. It's like, oh, of course you're going to have that worldview because that's your pillar. And I can hold space and compassion and understand, and also hold space for myself. It's like, I'm not meant to live up to your pillars. I've got my own pillars, right? And she appreciates me for who I am, touch wood. So it's
I
everywhere.
love it.
Again, 20
I
minutes
love
from
it.
now, you can be as clear as I am. inspiredevolution.com/values, mini masterclass there for you to discover your values.
Amazing. Well,
What the fuck? I don't get that. But anyway.
no, we'll have it. I'll have it all in the description. And I just want to say thank you so much. This was such a just juicy conversation. And I think so many takeaways, definitely the importance of really clarifying what are your bottom line values. And once you have that, that guides everything. Amrit, thank you for being here, for who you are, honestly, your courage. I just keep seeing that light up, the courage to be your You-est you. It takes courage. It's something I say every time. If you're going to decide to step into your soul self, that authenticity, the part of you that's whispering, it takes courage. That's going to be probably one of the most important skills to develop. So thank you for who you are, for the courage that you've leaned into, and thank you for being here. It was so fun to connect with you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie. And honestly, I've shared my story a few times, different stages, different platforms and stuff, and just the way you've held space for me to be able to share the story and also, revel in the insights along the way. This was beyond enjoyable. This was profound for me as well. Just the space that you hold is just epic. And, I genuinely love your podcast, have so much love for you and the work you're doing in the world. And I said this at the end of, our connection as well, my podcast, it's so hearty for me to just know that you're out there doing your work in this world the way that you are as well. It's like, yes, we're not alone, it's like, and the revolution is being televised through our podcast, through these podcasts. It's actually happening. It's amazing. So touchwood, just, yes, super grateful for you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and just share myself so abundantly with your tribe and audience. And yeah, such a treat. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. And I'll just say from both of us that thank you to you, beautiful listener, because hopefully you realize you're part of this tribe as well. The courage, we know you have it. We know it's within you. And it takes that. It takes courage. It takes that integrity, that honesty, that time to look within you. And thank you for being here on this journey with us. So much love. Mwah. We'll see you soon. My friend, I'm so grateful and honored to be here with you on your journey and being your You-est you. Thank you for watching this episode, for being part of this incredible community and this mission to really step into your light, to your highest purpose. I believe that as we all do that, we all can really be our best selves and uplift consciousness and in humanity. So thank you. I also wanted to say that if you are looking for greater support right now, maybe you're having a health concern, or you're looking to really step into that next version, best version of yourself, please come connect with me, whether it's for more resources or coaching or guidance. I would love to support you in any way that I can. Just go to juliereisler.com. You can book a powerful one-on-one breakthrough session there. You can connect with me. I would love to meet you. I'd love to hear how I can be on this journey with you. And before I forget, if you'd like a little more of this good vibe tribe and would like to digest these episodes with a high vibe community, just go to Facebook and look up the You-est You podcast community. You'll find us there. Love always. And thank you so much for taking the time and energy to truly stepping into your authenticity and being your You-est you.